The biggest benefit for using audio over MIDI is the audio editing tools. So today we're going to dive into all of those functions as well as just have a little bit of fun editing audio. So firstly, I wanted to bring your attention to this help section up here. If you hear me say anything today that you're not quite sure what that meant, for instance, let's type in duplicate. And if you hover your mouse over that, it'll show you where it is, the shortcut to it. The next thing I want to mention before we go on is this info view down the bottom. The shortcut is the question mark key. Whenever you hover your mouse over anything, even the stuff in these menus up here, it'll tell you in the info view what it does as well as the shortcut. When we're editing audio, just make sure this button up here is turned off. What this button actually does is it turns your keyboard into a MIDI controller. So if I hit the A key on my keyboard when this is turned on, it just triggers a MIDI note. You can see that over here. But if I turn that off, then it actually triggers a shortcut. Okay, so I've got this drum loop and these chords here. And the first thing I want to bring your attention to here is actually the matrix that exists within Ableton. You can see that at the top of every clip, there is this header bar here, and that's where the title is of that clip. If I click and drag below that bar, you can see that it's actually going to highlight the section on the timeline. But if I click and drag above that bar, then it actually drags the clip around. So you have to keep in mind that there is that matrix, there's this below click and drag, and there's this above one if we want to drag the actual clip around. And these things actually work in tandem as well. I can click and drag a section below this line here, and then hover my mouse up here and actually just drag that little highlighted segment around as well. So we can drag things around, we know how to do this now. But what I can actually do is highlight this section and copy it as well. I can copy with just regular copy and paste functions, Command C, Command V if you're in Mac. And now I've got this kick drum, which I just copied from this section, and I can paste it back here. We can also go ahead and highlight sections and delete them. And then similar to deleting stuff is just cropping off the ends. So I can do that by dragging my mouse to the edge of any audio clip boundary that I have, and I can just drag it to the left or the right. And that is going to crop the end or extend it out. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about how clips behave in live. And so if I drag this section, highlight it and drag it over here, like we've discussed earlier, what actually happens when I do this, it actually just crops this section out. If I was to extend this boundary here, you can see that I have all of the information that I had in this clip over here. So in a way, this is kind of acting like duplicating the clip. If I was to do this again, and go like this, and then extend the boundary out again, you can see that I have these duplicates of these clips here. But understanding this is actually one of the most useful things when it comes to audio editing in Ableton. It gives us a whole bunch of really cool possibilities when we're editing clips. This is what we had originally. What I'm actually going to do is highlight this section here. I'm going to hit copy. I'm going to click here and paste it. And so what this is going to do is going to paste this kick drum like we saw earlier. But if I extend this boundary out, you can see that the information that was over here is now being pasted over here. And this is in a slight different position. So that's going to give us some interesting different results. We're essentially just dragging this section and pasting it over here. So let's have a listen to this. This little kick drum is actually over here, is now in this position, and it gives us an interesting result. Let's just keep dragging this out and see what this does. Maybe I can grab this snare here and put it in a different position over this. So you can get some really, really interesting grooves by just doing this alone. So now I want to talk about splitting clips. Splitting clips, you can do that with Command E. I can just click here and split it. What I can also do is highlight a section and split that, and it's going to make two boundaries. And what splitting clips allows me to do is a whole bunch of things. Once we double click on this clip, we can see the clip view, and there's all these different functions that will specifically affect just this one little clip. So all of these functions in here just apply to each individual clip that you have. So all of these are behaving separately to each other. So I can turn down the volume of this clip and it's not going to affect this one, right? So I'll take this moment just to explore some of the functions that we have in here. The most important ones that you're going to want to know are the gain, which is the volume here. I can also change the pitch of this here as well. So I've turned it down 9 semitones here. Let's just have a listen to this. I think it's a clap, right? So you can see that it's been pitched down now. It sounds quite low. And then we also have our warp modes in here, and you can do some other like warping stuff in here, which I'm not going to talk about right now. And just like any of the commands that I'm going to be talking about today, if you right click, it's likely that it's probably going to be in this menu here. So you can see that splits right here. I can click that and it's going to split it for me. If you're new here with producing electronic music, make sure to go check out our in-depth music production guide. It includes a whole bunch of free resources and video training to get you started. So I'll leave a link in the description for that one. So we also have things like cut and deactivate, and this is going to remove the audio that we have in specific ways. So if I hit Command X, that's going to cut it and allow me to paste it wherever I want. We can also highlight, right click and deactivate the clip, and that's just going to turn it off but leave the information there so we can turn it back on if we need to. And you can also do that with a shortcut, which is just the 0 key. So the 0 key is a really useful shortcut to know. If I click on a track over here and hit the 0 key, it's actually going to mute it over there. You can see that it's muting these tracks by hitting the 0 key. If we have any devices or plugins, I can highlight that and hit 0, and that's going to turn it off and on. So essentially 0 is just turning things off and on. So if I was to highlight a section like this and just drag it as we did before, it's actually going to take it from this section and put it over here as you'd expect. But if I was to hold Option whilst I'm dragging, you can see that when I hit Option, there's a little plus icon, and that's actually going to duplicate it as opposed to just drag it. If we click on any clip or highlight any section and hit the R key, that's actually going to reverse the clip or the section that we've highlighted. So that's kind of a nice experimental thing to do. We can sort of reverse things and play around with that. That's kind of cool. And then you'll see at the border of any clip or any clip boundary, you'll see that there's these little boxes here and they're fades. So these things allow you to actually fade the audio in and out. So if I was to go like this and sort of just crop the edge off, I can now fade this. So you can fade this kick drum so it's going to be really short now. I can adjust the fade curve by using this little handle in here, so I can make that really short. Let's have a listen to this. And we can also crossfade clips together. So let's say I move this into a different position over here. So to crossfade, what you need to do is grab your fade handle, and I'm going to grab this edge one, and I'm just going to drag it to the left this time instead of dragging it in. If I drag it to the right, it fades it this way. If I drag it to the left, then it's going to do a crossfade. So let's use some of the audio editing tools on this Rhodes piano and see what we can do with it. I'm going to start off by just having a listen. I think what I'm going to do is just highlight this section over here, and I'm just going to drag it to the left here. So now we have this. And now what I'm going to do is highlight this section over here and drag that and copy. I'm going to hold Option whilst I do this and paste it over here. So now let's have a listen to this. So it's a little bit different from before. It's just repeating this section. Double click on this clip now, and I'm going to use my pitch transpose, and I'm going to transpose this down a few semitones, just down 2. Let's have a listen to this one now. Oh, it's a bit of a different vibe. I think I'm just going to drag this one over to the right a little bit. And what I'm doing there is I'm actually just aligning it up with this section over here. So we have the same sort of changing chord progression groove. And then just to fill this gap here, I'm just going to drag out this boundary so it just fills this empty space. You can also even experiment with dragging out this one and see what that does. And then I'm just going to crop off the end, so just delete this section here. So you can see that these audio editing functions are really powerful and just also a lot of fun to use. So the last thing before I move on, if I want to turn all of these separate sliced up clips back into one audio clip like we had at the start, what I need to do is just highlight the section that I want to turn into a single audio clip, right click and go down to Consolidate, and that's going to consolidate that for me. So I can also hit the shortcut, which is Command J. So I thought I'd do another example just to show you all of the audio editing functions in practice. Let's go again and sort of just manipulate this, this break that we have here. So this will be a fun one to play around with. There's kind of a lot of different tones going on. So we've got this snare drum here. And you can see that this one is actually a little bit early. So maybe I want to delay that snare drum so it actually hits at the same time as this one. Let's grab this section and just drag it back like this. And then I'm just going to extend the boundary and sort of just crossfade these together. See if we can get a nice crossfade here. So let's have a listen to this. So maybe over in this section, I can actually just highlight this section and delete it. And then I'm going to go in here and use the fade to sort of just shorten this snare drum here. So let's have a listen to this. So maybe that was a little bit too short. Let's just drag this back a bit. And maybe I can just drag this over as well. Let's have a listen to this little section in here and see if we can reverse this and make it sound good. So I'm going to click and highlight this section here, and I think I want to actually drag and duplicate this over to here, and let's have a listen to this. So maybe I can even extend this boundary out and just see what happens when I do that. That's kind of a nice little chop. So something else you can experiment with is if I highlight this section and click and drag and hold Option and actually just paste it onto a new track, it's going to duplicate the track exactly, and it's got the same name and everything. And this time I'm going to reverse this. So let's hit R, and then I'm just going to sort of fade this, and then I'm going to drag it over here. So one thing that I actually haven't mentioned yet is if I'm clicking and dragging this, it's going to snap to the grid. But if I don't want it to snap to the grid, what I can actually do is hold Command on Mac, and you can see that it's a lot more smooth now, as before, sort of staggers around, but now it's a bit more smooth. So I can actually place this exactly where I want. Maybe I want to place it here. Remember, this is sort of a reverse snare. So let's have a listen to this. Maybe I could actually place it a little bit further forward. So I definitely recommend experimenting around with chopping up some sort of break loops and drum loops and having a little bit of fun with that. I've got a few other elements in here. So I've got this synth loop here. I've got this sort of noise down riser as well. What I'm thinking is I could even click this and hit R, and that's just going to rise up as opposed to going down. So let's have a listen to this now. Okay, so now I want to show you some stuff with this bass loop here. We have a few problems with this bass loop, and as you can see, the first one is it's not actually in sync with our loop here. You can see that the end of the clip is here, and we want it to end here. So what I'm going to do is hit this warp button, turn warping on. I'm just going to hit yes here. What happens when you hit warp? The way that is the least confusing is just stretching it in the timeline. So if I go over this clip boundary over here and hold Shift, I can actually just stretch it around right here. So going to the end of the clip boundary, hold Shift and drag that out. And now that is actually in time with our track, or almost in time. So we have another problem here, and that is that this is in G minor and the rest of this track is actually in D sharp. So what we actually want to do is get this from a G to a D sharp. An easy way to conceptualize this is get a MIDI track, and I'm going to make a MIDI note on G. This one right here. And I'm going to drag this around until I find a D sharp. A D sharp is here, right? And a G is here. So if I go down 1, 2, 3, 4 semitones, then that will reach my D sharp from a G. So I'm going to go over to this sample over here and turn it down 1, 2, 3, 4 semitones. And let's have a listen to this. So what's actually happened here is it's become too low for me to hear. So I've got another option here. I'm just going to hold Shift and up, and that's going to put it up exactly 12 semitones, which is an octave. So that now sounds good with my track, but it's actually still got a little bit of timing problems. You can see that the transient just starts right here, but the actual grid marker is there. So what we can actually do is just fix that up on the timeline using the shortcut that we learned earlier. So if I hold Command and just drag this to the right slightly, but now that this one starts on the grid line, this one doesn't start on the grid line. So again, we can just fix this with using audio editing functions. I can slice this clip here. I'm holding Command and I can drag this around off the grid, right? And then I can just drag this back onto the grid here. And that's gonna fix it up nice and easy for me. And then all of these, rest of them are the exact same. So I could just go like this and just duplicate this over. Command D to duplicate those over. And now we've got this looping perpetually. So you can also do the exact same thing that I just showed you in the clip view editor itself, but it's a little bit more confusing. So what I would do here is just double click on all of these transients first, and then just drag these transients onto the grid lines like this. Keep that one there, drag this one on there. And now that's gonna sync up with the tempo. So at this point in your music production journey, if you're just learning the audio editing tools for the first time, all I expect is to go away and experiment with editing some drum loops, editing some audio or just synth loops in general. Use the audio editing tools, start getting familiar with how they work, how editing clips work in Ableton, and maybe even start messing around with warping on the timeline and seeing what things you can stretch and shorten. So learning all of these tools is just gonna come down to some time spent experimenting with it. So I hope you've enjoyed the video today. If you have, remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, thanks for hanging out, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.